If you think about the news that's coming out of Seoul, South Korea today, this week, you're probably thinking about phones that catch fire. But I want to tell you a different story from the same source, not Samsung, but Seoul, South Korea. In a dimly lit room in Seoul, South Korea, people dressed in white burial shrouds slowly sit up inside the wooden coffins where they've been lying, enclosed for 10 minutes. Blinking, pale, solemn. They say that they thought about their past and their loved ones while inside the coffins, and they vow to live a better life now. These mock funerals, as they're called, they're part of a well-dying tradition, a trend in South Korea, a sign that the country, once the most poor, or one of the world's poorest after the devastating war in the early 50s, has grown affluent enough to consider quality of life issues. But I want you to try to imagine that. Can you imagine you swipe your credit card and you walk in, you say, I'd like an extra large, and you take your clothes off and you exchange them for a burial shroud. And you go into a dimly lit room and you choose to place yourself in a pine box for some kind of encounter with life and death and with yourself. Would you have that courage? Would you have that need to see yourself in that moment, in that condition? To see one part of your future long before, God willing, it comes? What might go through your mind? One woman, a Korean woman who had that experience, says, I cried. I became incredibly sad about the choices that I'd made. I thought a lot about my mother. She was beautiful and generous. I was thinking about a book that I read this summer, a book that consumed me first as an audiobook that I listened to, and then that I read and reread, and I think it's a book that will stay on my bedside table for a long time because of the stories within the book, if not only for the book and its premise. And it's called The Road to Character by David Brooks. Brooks writes about the difference between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. Resume virtues, of course, are resume virtues. They're those things that we bring to the marketplace. But eulogy virtues are deeper. They're who you are in your depth. They're what's the nature of your relationships. The questions of, are you bold and loving and dependable and consistent and supportive and generous and good, not only in intention but in deed? I suspect that resume virtues wouldn't even enter into that coffin in that mock funeral place in Korea. They say that young people regret things that they did, and they say that old people regret things that they didn't do. And I wonder if young people, if they were placed in that box, in that condition at any age, might become old suddenly, might suddenly gain a new perspective and not think about what they've done, but instead think about what they haven't done, the life they haven't yet lived, the virtues they haven't yet developed, the relationships that they haven't yet taken enough care of. I wonder if those moments bring us to the extraordinary realization not only of death, but of the extraordinary gift of life. I've said in recent years that in praying I've realized the importance of two directions. Of praying in left to right in English in your prayer book and right to left in Hebrew, moving as we do as Jews left and right, back and forth, undulating between one direction and another. And I've said that the same, I think, is true of our lives, that we move forward in terms of our acquisitions, what we gain, what we produce in this world, what we build, what we strive to do. But we have to find moments when we shift direction and turn around in order to see whom we've become. Turn in a different direction to realize that we're acquiring wisdom and depth, not just knowledge. I have to tell you that in 20 years of meeting with families prior to funerals, nobody's ever cried over resume virtues of their loved ones. Not once. Not once. I've been the one to ask family members, tell me, what did your sister do for a living? It's so far from their thinking. It's so divorced from their tears. And David Brooks was inspired by another book, a very thin book, thinner than his, a thin, dense Jewish book called The Lonely Man of Faith by Soloveitchik. And what Soloveitchik does in this book is he posits two sides to our nature. He calls them Adam 1 and Adam 2. Adam 1 is the worldly, ambitious, external side of our nature. Adam 1 wants to build and create and innovate and dominate. And Adam 2 wants not only to do good, but to be good. To live in a way that internally honors God, creation, and possibilities. Adam 1 wants to conquer the world. Adam 2 wants to hear a calling and to obey the world. Adam 1 savors accomplishment. And Adam 2 savors inner consistency and strength. Adam 1 asks how things work, and Adam 2 asks why we're here. Adam 1's motto is success, and Adam 2's motto is redemption and return and love. Adam 1 seeks to dominate the Garden of Eden, and Adam 2 seeks to cultivate it, to preserve it. Soloveitchik argues that both of us, or all of us, have both of those demeanors, both of those possibilities, both of those warring, conflicting beings within us, both of those yitzarot, those drives. David Brooks writes, the tricky thing about these two sides of our nature is that they work by different logic. The external logic is an economic logic. Input leads to output. Risk leads to reward. The internal side of our nature is a moral logic, and often an inverse logic. You have to give to receive. You have to surrender to something outside yourself to gain strength within yourself. You who are in 12-step programs, recovery, you who challenge yourself every single day to realize that part of your nature, realize what it is to grow from within because you challenge yourself around yourself in the circumstances of your life. To realize that every day in those programs you're challenging yourself, as you do in this religion, to build your interior self. Not what you build outside that the world sees, but what you realize becomes your character and your depth. I spoke earlier, Rosh Hashanah, about my admiration for those heroes among us, those people in every community, but particularly those whom I know and recognize and admire in this one, who make that a daily struggle, to build a life of worth and character, to realize harm done and harm inflicted, and to realize their capacity and all of our God-given capacity to grow to new strengths, to new potential. One of the things that Soloveitchik asks of us to do is to shrink ourselves. And it's interesting when you think that Soloveitchik wasn't a chassid, but it's a deeply chassidic thought. The idea that we need to shrink ourselves, make ourselves smaller to create room for God. How did Alice make it into the land, into Wonderland? She had to make herself small. What do we do in this service? With giant words like sanctuary and holy and sacred and Avinu and Malkeinu and God and Master and creation, we diminish ourselves in these moments to realize our sweet humility, our great capacity, what it is sometimes in these moments to grasp that aspect of whom we're trying to be. But the world doesn't want to know that part of us. The world is fixated on Adam 1. What are our achievements, our successes, and our accomplishments? The world says, don't apologize. It shows weakness. The world says, don't show her your vulnerabilities, she'll pounce on them. The world, society, Adam 1 says to us, elaborate on your college resume, on your college essay. Make it extraordinary, even heroic. Truth is less important than entrance. Make it something worthy of a prize or even a memoir at age 17. But ultimately, our character asks, is that how we want to live? And is that whom we want to be? And is that ultimately what we want to be when we come to that moment, not by choice but by fate, when we look at life from the past? When we look back and see whom we've become, the choices that we made, and the society that lived with us, but the person within us of character that despite all the challenges and vagaries around us, despite all of those challenges that bombard our kids and us as their parents and grandparents, that we struggled and strived to become better people. That Adam 1 was always an important part of being American and being us and doing good in the world, but Adam 2 had to have a place where it could be nurtured. That there's something to every human being within that can only be built in silence. That sometimes we have to stop doing and creating and building and producing to build and create and produce. To realize the capacities that were given to every human being. The religion that gave us this name, this archetype of Adam, gave us tools with which to develop Adam, even in Eve. Men and women to realize what it is to strive to build our own lives through prayer and mitzvot, through sacred opportunities and experiences. David Brooks writes of Adam 2, he says, or Adam 1, he says, Adam 1 culture turns you into a shrewd animal who treats life as a game. And you become cold, a calculating creature who slips into sort of mediocrity when you realize that there's a difference between your desired self and your actual self. You're not earning the sort of eulogy you want, that you hope someone one day will give to you. You don't have the depth of conviction. You don't have an emotional sonorousness. You don't have commitment to tasks that would take more than a lifetime to commit. I've suggested over the course of the last month and the course of these holy days of awe that we find what it is to experience awe, that we find faith in God and faith in ourselves, that we don't allow ourselves to be atheists, having a religion of nothing, a religion of belief that we aren't good enough to be better, and that God, whatever we understand God to be, doesn't have that expectation and belief in us. These are the times when we go inside, when we stop to be silent, when we go into what I call that library of mistakes to realize the litany of our choices, when we go into our relationships and look deeply into other people's eyes and say, you and I are making this sacred journey, it'll become more beautiful. It'll live more to its great potential if we can have honest conversation that includes, I'm sorry, and I did and continued to do wrong, but now I'm contrite. I've made a decision to realize something about myself, which is I have a capacity and a need to change. Both the capacity and the need. There's no relationship that can survive without both. And what is it when we see another person in our life or people in our lives and realize that the reason to forgive them is because we're going to be the one to need the forgiveness next? And what is it when we realize that we're developing children with all of these exterior strengths and abilities and hoops and scores and spins and pirouettes, but if we don't take the time and make the investment in what Soloveitchik calls Adam 2, that part of their soul and being that's worthy of time and great investment, that religion and tradition and shared experience and community breed, then we're just building people who will function in a society. I said on Rosh Hashanah that my fear is that that boy, that girl who's striving for success might achieve it too soon. Age 26 with a new app, age 30 with some product or an idea, but then what? What is life striving and challenge if life isn't about growing ourselves in relation to the people around us and the world in which we live? That's a spiritual journey. To realize the spiritual in every encounter, that you raise my spirits and I change yours. That spirituality isn't only religion, but sometimes it's in religion. That it's always when two people meet each other in a place or eye to eye or in a conversation. That we build Adam 1 in the world, in our achievements, but that we build Adam 2 in our weaknesses. But if we don't take the time to find out what they are, if we don't have the gall, the temerity, the will, the wisdom, the willfulness to open a door into our souls on these days when we dare to wear a shroud, a white garment, then it becomes a piece of theater devoid of merit and meaning. Then it's something to applaud in other people instead of cultivate in ourselves. I won't be surprised if one of you discovers something about you that I discovered about myself some days ago in the prayer book. That there are all of these generalized sins that all of us can say, yes, I did, and I do, and I subscribe to, and I'm part of. But something I realized that I hope you might realize as well is that if we go deeper, if we allow ourselves real depth and yearning and striving in this holy day that continues until Havdalah tomorrow or longer if you need it to, because holiness doesn't have a timeline and limits, then we might realize the sin of our sins, if you'll excuse that archaic word, sin. We might realize that underneath this pattern of the sins of our lives, of our shortcoming, is something deeper than that, that is the source of all of those. The compensation that we create in our lives, where spirituality isn't, where it can shine light, where it can develop our humanity. Imagine if on this holy day you come to see yourself in that way, how painful it might be. How extraordinary it might be not to have to go to South Korea and sit in a box, to find out the urgency of living, to find the importance of ethics, to find the decency of goodness, to find what it means to be people of character and not merely worth in our pockets, but worth in our hearts and our deeds. To realize that all of us who subscribe to this holiday called Yom Kippur and choose to make it holy if we find our whole selves in it. If we see ourselves in these seats as participants in this Jewish saga of history. That once there was a Moses and a David and a Sarah and a Rachel, and we were given all of those stories so we could see people just like us struggling to make journeys and meaning of the journeys. So we'd realize that they didn't become heroic, none of them, because of their acquisitions. They became memorable and heroic and the source of our children and grandchildren's names because of their souls, because of the stories they built through their struggles, because of the weakness that we found in their stories and the strengths that they found in their journeys. When we meet Joseph early in his story, we think, heroic? This guy? I wouldn't even write a book about him. Why does he get included? But then follow him, because if you have the patience that he does to grow, you realize by the end why he's worthy of memory and inclusion in our story. Why human beings, as broken as every single one of us is, have the capacity for heroism, to be sources of admiration for others, to be role models for one another. I imagine that the mock funeral business is going to make it to Chatsworth and Malibu and Calabasas. It's probably going to happen. But I don't think you and I need it because you came here. I don't think we need to do that. I think we can come and do this. And we can realize a community is here for us not hours of a year, but all year round, so that we can grow in relation to each other, so that we can strengthen each other and find what it is to realize oneness out of many. What I call my version of bad math, which is 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 still equals 1. So this Yom Kippur, I pray that your struggles are worthwhile, that the darkness that you find illuminates your soul and allows greater light to emanate from you in the year to come. That you and we as a community not only are, as Abraham is, a blessing, but as God says to him, you too shall be a source of blessing. Gmar Chatima Tova to all of you. May you be not only written, but inscribed in the book of life. Those of you who fast, may the fast sometimes be difficult. I hate the idea of wishing each other tzom kal as is custom. May it be an easy fast. One tradition in a fast is that you eat salty meat as your last meal to make it more difficult to get through the fast. So may the fast be memorable. May it challenge you, and may through it all of us realize more of our character. Thank you.